Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. Good news if you're a fan of the show. Sap and I are going to be ramping this thing up and providing, trying to do at least 2 shows a week now as the NBA heads towards the postseason. And there's all this, drama to talk about. And as the playoffs continue, we, in the past few years, have usually done at least 2 or 3 shows a week. So lots more shows for you to look forward to. If you're not a fan of the show, that's definitely disappointing news for you. But Sap, I think we're going to try to do a little bit more as the season gets down to the wire here.
Sure. Yeah, we've got a little over a month left in the regular season and the postseason, and it's wide open once again in the NBA. It appeared up until maybe the last couple of weeks that Milwaukee and the Celtics were going to run away from everybody in the Eastern Conference and then meet in the Eastern Conference Finals, which that may happen, but it may be a little bit more difficult than just that. And now with Kevin Durant in Phoenix, the West is more wide open. So it should be a fun final month of the regular season and 2 months of the playoffs. And we'll see who gets crowned champion sometime in the middle of June.
Yeah, and this sort of follows a trend that we've seen the past few seasons where for years and years, it was the Golden State Warriors and LeBron James Invitational, where you just knew who was going to meet in the finals every year. It was kind of just, okay, we're going to just wait until June and then see what happens. Now it's so much more wide open, and that's much better for the league. It's much better for fans to not know what to expect, and that seems to be the exact spot we are in right now. And starting with the Celtics, my team, they looked like almost a runaway favorite for most of the season, and then the All-Star break hit, and they have not come out of it strong at all. They've lost 3 straight. They've lost 4 of their last 5. And in the 3 straight losses they've had, Sap, they've blown double-digit leads in all of those games. 2 of those losses were in overtime, 1 to the Knicks in double overtime, and last night to the Cavaliers in overtime. And the prior loss was to Brooklyn. So it's not like they're losing to the dregs of the league. The Knicks have been playing really well. Cleveland, we know, is good. That was your pick before the season to go to the finals, Sap. But it is worrying that as the season's now getting down to this stretch where it's so tight that the Celtics are playing their worst basketball of the season. And so, Sap, what do you think's going on with the team? Is this an anomaly, or is there something to really be concerned about here?
Well, we look at these last 3 games, right? They had a 28-point lead against Brooklyn, ended up losing by 10. They had a 14-point lead.
Which seems impossible, by the way.
That really does, especially Brooklyn doesn't have Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving anymore. I mean, Mikal Bridges was outstanding. And that kind of leads me to another point that it seems like every night someone goes off for 40 points or close to 40 points against them, right? Mikal Bridges did it on Friday night in that Brooklyn win over the Celtics. Quigley does it on Sunday night in the double overtime win by the Knicks over the Celtics. And then last night, no surprise, Donovan Mitchell, who's certainly one of the 10 best players in the league, has another huge game against the Celtics. But they had the 28-point lead against Brooklyn, lost by 10. They had a 14-point lead over the Knicks, lost in double overtime. And then they had a 15-point lead over Cleveland and lost in overtime. Like, that does happen in the NBA. I mean, this is not, 1997 when a 14 or 15-point second half lead was insurmountable. I mean, these teams can come back from that because teams get hot from 3, teams get cold from 3. Next thing you know, a 15-point lead is down to 3 within a matter of moments. That's the way the league is right now. I think the biggest concern is, and this has been trending in the wrong direction for a while, Jet. They got off to a 21-5 start, mostly because of their offense, right? And we saw the coaching change from Ime Udoka to Joe Mazzulla. Mazzulla more of an offensive coach, Udoka more of a defensive coach. The Celtics have not played good defense all year long. I mean, they just haven't been as tight as they were a year ago. That was their calling card a year ago, was defense. Even in the finals, even though they lost in 6 games to Golden State, they played really good defense. They were holding Golden State to 104 points per game, and it was a consistent 104 points per game. It just depended on what the Celtics were going to do offensively in the finals, if they would win or lose. They get off to that 21-5 start. They were an all-time great offense for those first 26 games of the season, Jet. They were shooting essentially 50% from the floor, 40 from 3, and about 85% from the free throw line. They essentially were shooting what Kevin Durant has shot throughout his career. So the Celtics had like 5 Kevin Durants on the floor for 48 minutes a night for those first 26 games, thus a 21-5 record. Since then, they've kind of regressed to the norm. I mean, they're a really good shooting team. They're not going to shoot 40% from 3-point territory for the entire year. So since that 21-5 start, the offense has kind of come back to normal, and the defense hasn't been any better. Thus, you go 24-16 over the last 40 games, which is half of a season. That's a 49-win pace, which is good, but not what we expected from the Celtics this year. So the defense hasn't been really good all year. It's been kind of mediocre, we'll call it that. The offense,
Yeah, it's right in the middle of the pack.
Exactly. When they're hitting their threes, they're impossible to beat. When they're not hitting their threes, they're going to struggle. But that's kind of a lot of teams in the NBA, isn't it? So that's been the issue with the Celtics. Look, 24-16 over the last 40 games, 10-9 over the last 19. That's a quarter of a season. That's like a 500 record, just barely above it. That's not good enough, especially with Milwaukee running off a 16-game winning streak, Philadelphia having the best record in basketball since December 1st, Cleveland and the Knicks both playing excellent basketball. The East is deep. And, you could be looking at a first-round series against the Miami Heat. I think you beat Miami, but that's going to be a 6-game series, and it's going to be a slugfest. And then after that, you're playing maybe Philadelphia, who the Celtics own, but Philadelphia's playing with more confidence now. Not going to be easy to return to the finals, especially the way they're playing right now. It just doesn't seem like they're all together.
Yeah, it's really, they look like a different team from when they started the season. But last year they looked like a different team from the start of the season in a positive way. This year it's gone the complete reverse, where they started off like a house on fire and they've really, like you said, regressed. And a lot of it, I think, definitely has to do with defense, but they're not great in close games. That's a big factor of it too, Sap, is that I think they're 7 in overtimes against top 10 teams. They've beaten a couple, bad teams in overtime. But they haven't been great in OT this year. And at the end of games, they've really struggled to close these out. You mentioned the leads that they've blown. A lot of those have come in the second half or fourth quarter of games. And last night you saw that against Cleveland. The Celtics were up in the fourth quarter and couldn't put the Cavaliers away. In fact, Grant Williams had a chance to win the game with no time left, shooting 2 free throws, and didn't manage to hit a single one of those after saying he was going to hit them both. So they haven't been able to put away teams at the end of games too. That's obviously, that speaks to defense, that speaks to shot making. Jason Tatum in these overtime games has been dreadful. Sap, you tweeted out or responded to a stat the other day in terms of Jason Tatum's 3-point percentage in these overtime games, right?
It's crazy. And this came from Boston Sports Inf. The O is not there because they can't fit it on there, but it's Boston Sports Info. And they have great stuff because they just play by the numbers. They're not having a side where they try to make a player look better or worse than he is. It's just, here are the numbers. Right. In overtime games throughout his career in the regular season and postseason, Jason Tatum is 3 for 35 from beyond the arc. 3 for 35 on 3-point shots. I mean, Russell Westbrook looks
What's
at
the
that.
percentage on that, Sep?
It's about, it's less than 10%. It's about 8.5%, thereabouts. Like, I think you and I could go out there and hit. You and I could probably go out there and hit 3 of 35 at some point. Again, 3 of 35 on 3-point shots in overtime during the regular season and the postseason. I mean, that is specific, but that's a pretty important time of the game, right? If you get to overtime, it's winning time, and he's just not been able to produce. Part of it is he takes too many threes. I mean, the other night,
agreed. Yeah.
Against Brooklyn, he had against the Knicks on Sunday night when they lost in double overtime. He had 40 points. He was 12 of 30 from the floor. He wasn't efficient. I mean, the same day, Kevin Durant was 12 of 17 from the floor and scored 37 points. And again, I always push back that, okay, Tatum is the closest thing to Durant. Yeah, maybe he's the closest thing to Durant, but he's still miles away from being Kevin Durant, because Kevin Durant is by far the most efficient, great scorer I have ever seen. And we talked about that in last week's podcast, that I'd love to see Durant go on one night and take 50 shots and see where it would land. I mean, he'd be in the 80s without question, because he's that good. He just doesn't play that way. He plays the game correctly. But yeah, Tatum has not been good in overtime, whether it be in the regular season or the postseason. Jaylen Brown, I think, is a better closer than Jason Tatum, but we always question his ball handling ability and the fact that both of these guys turn the ball over. Marcus Smart plays hero ball a bit too much. I think we talked about it last week too, Jet. I would like to see maybe a closing lineup, and it has to be against specific teams because it wouldn't be a big lineup. But what about Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, Derek White, Malcolm Brogdon on the floor together? I just want to see what that looks like. Again, you're small. You might be
arguably your best 5, right?
Your best 5 players. Yeah, I mean, Al Horford's been marvelous. Rob Williams, I mean, can you count on him? And Grant Williams is in a funk right now as he's playing for a new contract. He's played awful the last month and a half. I mean, pretty much all year he's been out of sorts, but especially the last month and a half. I'd like to see those 5 guys. Doesn't necessarily have to be a closing lineup. Maybe play it in the third quarter if you want to, and see where you go with it. Again, it's a smaller lineup, but Tatum can rebound. Brown's a good rebounder. Heck, he had 13 last night against Cleveland. And then you have three natural guards out there. So what that does to me is the spacing would be outstanding. I think the defense would still be very good because Derek White and Marcus Smart, they're both really good perimeter defenders. Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum as well. And Malcolm Brogdon's such a smart player that he'll make the right basketball play. But you also take the ball handling out of the hands of Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown so they can concentrate on scoring, because now you have Smart, White, Brogdon, all guys that can handle the ball, and you can run the offense through those guys. I would just like to see what that's like. It's like that death lineup that Golden State used to roll out, right?
Yeah.
With Durant, Iguodala, Draymond,
Thompson,
Klay
Green.
Thompson, and Curry. Yeah, so you just here's our 5 best players, and let's just roll with it and see what it is. Bigs be damned. Now, if you're playing Milwaukee and Giannis is out there, if you're playing Philadelphia and Joel Embiid is out there, maybe it's a little bit different. You may have to have at least one of the bigs out there, but I want to see that lineup at some point just to see what it's all about.
Yeah, I think a problem that they're running into now is a coaching issue. And we talked about this a few weeks ago as Mazzulla got his extension, and he is obviously inexperienced. And also, I think he's very stubborn. And you've seen that with some of the pushbacks he's had in the media when he's been questioned at all. But the Mazzulla ball is essentially take a lot of threes, and he doesn't really adapt to that at all if they're not hitting threes. He said, okay, they'll knock them down eventually. But I just don't think that's a way to coach your team, especially in big games. Like, you have to change your attack sometimes if it's not working. And there are nights where, Jason Tatum can't miss from 3. There are nights where he can't hit anything from 3, but he has the ability, and Jaylen Brown have the ability to drive to the basket whenever they want. But Mazzulla seems to just want them to keep hoisting away threes, especially, if they go down. So I don't think that's a great way to just say, we're only going to play this way, we're not going to adapt. And also, I think, like you said, Seth, with the lineups, he's unwilling to sort of change his lineups. They got Mike Muscala, who's an okay player, but they seem determined to almost shoehorn him in, like Mazzulla, because he can shoot threes. Mazzulla seems like to feel like, okay, I have to play this guy because he can stretch the floor. Whereas I think Cornette's been fine, and he doesn't shoot threes. He used to. He plays more around the basket, and they've been better with him on the court. So I do think that they are having some coaching issues rear their head right now at the worst time.
Yeah, without question. And we've questioned Mazzulla all year long, right, with his lack of using timeouts, with the way he's dealt with the media. I think Kendrick Perkins was great after the game last night when, again, Mazzulla was kind of snapping at Gary Washburn, who's an outstanding reporter, covers the team for the Boston Globe. And Perk, who I love because he has no filter. He says what's on his mind. He is not a honk for the team. He said, I wish Mazzulla would save some of that anger for his players, not the media. Like, he's picking fights with the media while he's, just throwing bouquets at his players. Whereas last year we saw Ime Udoka would call out his players in public. And I think that toughness really helped that team grow last year, because it's still a young team. They played great defense. They get to Game 6 of the NBA Finals. Mazzulla's tried to improve the offense, and it's been there in stretches, but the defense has slipped back. These last 3 losses, Jet, the Celtics have taken more 3-pointers than 2-pointers total in those 3 games. That's just not good. You know who took a lot of 3-pointers? The Houston Rockets in 2018, when they had a 3-2 lead over the Golden State Warriors. You know what happened in Game 6 and 7? They lost both games and blew a 3-2 lead. But they filled the requisite amount of 3-point attempts, according to analytics. I mean, I see this in football all the time. If you run the ball 30 times, you win. Well, that's the biggest bunch of bull I've ever heard. The game will dictate if you run the football 30 times or not. If you're trailing, you're not going to run it. Right. The game dictates what you do, run or pass. And if that's the case, you know what? The first 30 plays of a football game, just run the ball. You get to 30 attempts, you're guaranteed to win. That's not the way it works. And it's the same thing with these 3-point attempts. I think Mazzulla's a little bit too tied into analytics. Look, they've taken a step back in coaching. Whatever Ime Udoka did off the court, I don't know. If we ever find out, I'm sure it's going to be repulsive. But as a basketball coach, he was much better prepared for this job than Joe Mazzulla, who's 34 years old. And let's not forget, Jet, he's taking over a prestige franchise, right? This is like the Lakers or the Celtics or the Warriors or whoever, teams that have championship aspirations. Maybe a 34-year-old coach can work taking over Orlando or somewhere else where you can kind of hide under the cracks and no one really analyzes.
Oh, because Seth, the microscope's only going to get more intense as the season continues to the postseason.
Yeah, what's going to happen? You play the Knicks in the second round, and it's Tom Thibodeau, who, last smiled back in 1997, but is a hard line coach, right? And I think he's coached circles around Joe Mazzulla in the 3 wins the Knicks have had over the Celtics. The Celtics should not lose 3 straight games to the Knicks, right? They just shouldn't. They're better. If both teams are fully healthy, you can make a case that, okay, Tatum and Brown are the 2 best players, then Randall's probably the 3rd best player. Then you can make a case that Brunson's the 4th best player.
Yeah, and they lost to them without Brunson. Brunson didn't play the other night.
Emmanuel Quigley looked like freaking Allen Iverson.
He did,
on
yes.
Sunday. Yeah, I mean, at 38 points. It seems like every night someone's getting their career high against the Celtics. And let's look at Marcus Smart on that. This is the reigning defensive player of the year. Isn't he supposed to be the guy who checks these guys and does a good job defensively? Fair. Not good at all. Since he's come back, he's kind of reverted back to bad Marcus Smart rather than good Marcus Smart. There's a lot of issues here, and we've only got a month left in the regular season to resolve them. I don't think they'll dip beyond 3. Like Milwaukee right now, I wouldn't say it's a firm hold on first in the Eastern Conference, but, they're playing so well that you would guess at this point with a month left that Milwaukee will be the 1 seed. The Celtics should be able to hold on to the 2 seed, although Philadelphia's playing excellent basketball. So if you drop to the 3, now you're playing the 6 seed, which might be Miami. Tough matchup. Miami's beaten the Celtics twice this year. We know they're well coached, and I don't think Miami fears the Celtics. That would be a tougher first round match than last year when they swept Brooklyn, albeit that sweep was one of the oddest sweeps I ever remember in NBA history because the Celtics only outscored Brooklyn by 18 points in those 4 games. They were like fairly close games. But I think Miami would find a way to win 1 or 2 games, and now you're on to the next series, and you're playing maybe Philadelphia. You own Philadelphia, but look, Embiid is good enough to dominate a series. You would have the best player on the court in that series in Joel Embiid, and I know the Celtics have done a pretty good job defending him in the past, but you're putting yourself through a lot more than you should. If you just took care of business, you'd be in better shape going into this final month. They've got a lot of question marks right now, Jet, and one of them is the coach, who's inexperienced and obviously thin-skinned and a bit too tightly wound for this job, perhaps.
Yeah, I think that those are all good points, Sepp, and I think that they're all showing right now. Fortunately for the Celtics, their schedule the rest of the way is not particularly difficult. They do have a game left against Milwaukee, and they do have a game left against Philadelphia. Those 2 games could be very, very important. But, the rest of it, they play Atlanta, Portland a couple of times, the Jazz a couple of times, Houston, Washington, San Antonio, Indiana, Toronto a few more times, Atlanta. So it is a favorable schedule going down the stretch. But if they play like this, obviously they can lose to anybody on any given night. They have to at least put up some resistance defensively and try other things besides shooting threes offensively. Otherwise, this team right now is playing, I think I tweeted this the other day, they're playing like a team that's going to lose in the second round of the playoffs. That's the type of basketball they're playing right now. And that would be a massive, massive failure considering the talent on this team. The one person that I don't blame at all for this is Brad Stevens. Brad Stevens, I think, has done his job, and I've been critical of him in the past more so when he was a coach, and I've been critical of ownership not supporting the team financially, but they stepped up this year and supported the team financially. This is all on the players and the coach this season.
Without question. It's no different than the Boston Bruins. Don Sweeney's done a great job assembling the talent that the Bruins are now the clear-cut favorite to win the Stanley Cup. If they don't produce and win the cup, it's on the players and the coach, right? So same thing with Brad Stevens. I would have liked maybe another big at the trade deadline, and maybe there'll be something available in the buyout market. Because again, how can you count on Rob Williams, who essentially plays 20 minutes a game 40 times a year? I mean, he's really a part-time player. He's load management unto himself. So those are obviously big issues. But yeah, this is on the players, on the coach. Did they just kind of feel good about themselves and feel that they're just, able to roll the balls out? I don't know. Even like these wins since the All-Star break, Jet, haven't been all that impressive. They nearly blew a 25-point lead to Cleveland a week ago. Cleveland cut it to 4 at the end.
Yep.
They had a last-second win over Philly on a Jason Tatum 3 in a game that they were fortunate to win, and they were life and death with the Indiana Pacers coming out of the break. So it's not like they've rolled through here and played great basketball. They're 3-4 since the break. They could very easily be, 1-6, and
Sure.
then you would have a complete free-for-all right there. So, yeah, these are a lot of questions that are going to have to be answered by the players and the coach. And we can't use the excuse that the starting 5 isn't together because, a lot of starting 5s aren't together.
And Sap, they're so deep. That's the point of this team. That's what they've been constructed to be, a deep team. And again, credit to Brad Stevens. That was the problem with the Danny Ainge Celtics for the last couple of years of his tenure. They had no depth at all. And
Mhm.
this team is, I believe, the deepest team in the NBA. This is a team that should win the championship. That's how I look at it. And
Yep.
if they don't, it's a failure in my mind.
Now, I know your least favorite Celtics team of the recent era was the 2018-2019 team, which grossly underachieved. Leading the way, or not leading the way, was Kyrie Irving. Do you see any similarities from that team to this team? That was a deep team as well, maybe too deep, where guys were more concerned with how many minutes they're playing. And I think we're seeing a little bit of that right now. Would say Grant Williams is playing for a contract.
Yeah.
Why isn't he playing more? I mean, he played half the minutes that Mike Muscala played last night. I'm sure when he went back to his hotel room, or if they flew out after the game or whatever, it was probably, questioning, why didn't I play more minutes than Muscala, who to me is just a non-factor, right? He can hit threes. If he's not, what else is he doing? I don't think it's quite as bad as that team, because Kyrie is such a destructive force, but it doesn't seem like they're all together. Like, to quote Doc Rivers, Ubuntu right now is not part of the Celtics mantra.
No, it's, I mean, that team, you kind of saw the writing on the wall that they at towards the end of the regular season, and then they lost in the second round that year after beating, I believe it was the Pacers in the first round, who were a
Swept the
non-factor that year.
Pacers. Yep.
Yeah.
But it was similar. It was similar to the way they swept Brooklyn last year. It was four somewhat close games. It almost sounds like a Yogi Berra statement. It was
And
a
it,
close
when it was
four-game
not
sweep.
a good Pacers team that they beat.
No. They just kind of grinded it out and hung in there with you. But the Celtics were able to close those games and win. And then you won game one in Milwaukee, and you were tied in the third quarter at Milwaukee. I'm like, they're going to beat the Bucks and they're going to go to the finals, because
And then they
so
kicked your
deep
ass the rest of the way.
the rest of the way. Yeah, Giannis took over and Kyrie decided it was time for summer vacation. So I wouldn't go as far as saying that this team is similar to that one, but you don't want to get to that point, because then you are looking at a second round extinction, which is not what this team should be doing this time around. I mean, to me, they're the best team in basketball when all things are clicking, and they were early in the season. Although the more I watch the Phoenix Suns, I think that they are right there in that discussion, as is Denver and Milwaukee.
Yeah.
Those would be your four best teams in basketball. But yeah, they should be playing better than this, and they've got to clean this up, because they've got a 6-game road trip coming up, and no matter who you're playing, those are always challenging. And two of those games left in the final 16 games of the season, you're going to see Dame Lillard twice. Like, what's he going to go off for? Like, if
Sure.
Emmanuel
Yeah.
Quigley gets 38, what the hell is Dame Lillard going to light you up for? 60, 70? I mean, heck, the guy had 71 a week ago, so he's capable of anything.
Yeah, and believe me, those guys are looking at these box scores before they play in the team and say, "Oh, the Celtics, I can score a lot of points on them." So
Does anyone fear the Celtics right now? I think they're respected. Remember, and I know we're going to talk about John Morant. Remember, about a month and a half ago, John Morant foolishly said, "I'm not worried about anything in the West. I'm only worried about the Celtics." So I
Yeah.
think teams know how good the Celtics are, but do they fear them? I don't get the impression that Milwaukee or Miami fears them. I think
No,
maybe
I don't think
Philadelphia
there's.
does, because they can't beat them. The Knicks don't. Cleveland doesn't. They, in fact, have kind of owned them this year.
Yeah, Cleveland has. I don't think that there's a team in the league that anybody particularly fears. Honestly, maybe if Phoenix, just rips into the playoffs, maybe them. But
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's not like when Golden State had Curry, Durant, Clay, Draymond Green, Iguodala, when you just looked over and said, "How the hell are we going to beat
I
these
look
guys?"
at the top 4 seeds in the East: Milwaukee, Boston, Philadelphia, Cleveland. Wouldn't, if any one of those teams were to beat the other, it wouldn't floor me. I wouldn't go, "Holy crap, this is an unprecedented upset."
No, I mean, I picked
I don't
Cleveland
think
before
so.
the season started, and for the most part, I think they've kind of fulfilled their promise. Donovan Mitchell's even better than I thought he was.
Yeah, they're
He's
capable.
sensational. They are. I mean, I think Evan Mobley's been somewhat of a disappointment this year. I thought he would grow in his second year. Maybe he's having a somewhat of a sophomore slump. He's outstanding. Darius Garland's really good. They're not that deep, and they need another wing. I think that's what they really need. If you could add, it doesn't have to be Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown caliber wing, but a good solid wing, a Harrison Barnes guy. That's the one we always throw out there. That's a competent wing who can defend and shoot. A guy like that, then I think Cleveland would be right there in the discussion with Milwaukee, the Celtics. Philly, the talent's there. Embiid is awesome. Harden's having a really good year. Tyrese Maxey's one of our favorite players, right? But they still have kind of the stink of finding ways to lose. And part of that's Doc Rivers, who, again, in his illustrious career, has blown 3-1 leads in the playoffs and 3 games to 2 leads in the playoffs. So, until they sew up a series, you can't count on the 76ers.
Yeah, and I don't think a lot of people are fearing the two-seeded Sacramento Kings in the Western
No,
Conference right
that's
now.
amazing, isn't it? Amazing.
It's
Mike Brown,
amazing.
Mike
I
Brown's
like had
coach of
to.
the
I
year,
refreshed
right?
my page. I was like, really? That's what they are. They're the 2 seed right now. They are. They're the two
Well,
seed.
remember last year when Memphis jumped up to the 2 seed and we're like, how
Yeah, but
that
at least
happened?
they have John Morant.
Well, they have De'Aaron Fox.
Yeah,
You know, I
I
mean,
guess. No, De'Aaron
he,
Fox is underrated. He is. So is
and
So is
Sabonis.
Sabonis.
Yeah, I mean, 2 All-Stars, right? So I guess, and Mike Brown is got to be coach of the year, right? I mean,
I think it
Sacramento hasn't
would
been a
be
factor in two
a
decades.
slap in the face if he wasn't.
Yeah. No,
I
but
don't
you're
know
right.
how.
No one's
Yeah.
fearing them. And is anybody fearing Denver as good as Jokic is? Because he's never really elevated in the playoffs. He kind of just does what he does. And their second best player is Jamal Murray, where I think there's other teams in the league have better second best players, like obviously Jaylen Brown, Phoenix with Devin Booker as their second best player,
Sure.
both better than Jamal Murray. So that's going to be interesting to see what happens there. But yeah, you're right. There's no team out there that people go, oh my Lord, there's no way we're going to win here. This is not Golden State with Curry, Durant, Klay Thompson, Draymond, and Iguodala. It's not Miami with LeBron and Wade. And certainly it's not, Jordan's Bulls who had you beat before the opening tap. I mean, you'd walk out for warm-ups, look across and see the bald-headed guy who was slightly intense, and you're like, I don't know if we have a chance tonight.
Right. And speaking of fear, I don't think people fear the Grizzlies, but they might fear for their safety when they're in the vicinity of John Morant. And we're gonna not just talk about this today because it's an ongoing story, and now he's being investigated by Colorado police. But if you don't know, or you've been living under a rock, John Morant has now been asked to step away from the Grizzlies for a bit, at least 2 games, because of an incident where he was on Instagram Live in a nightclub in Colorado, flashing a gun. This comes on the heels of an incident that's been reported that he flashed a gun at a 17-year-old kid after getting into a fight with him in a pickup game at his house. Another one where he threatened a security guard at a mall. And earlier in the season, when they played the Indiana Pacers, there were reports about John Morant's crew following the Pacers bus and pointing a red laser dot, indicating like a gun scope at the Pacers. So not a good situation. And again, Sap, we don't have to get into every single detail right now because we're going to continue to talk about this, I think, going forward, because it is a big story. But it is really just a remarkable fall from grace as to where he was a year ago, which was you and I saying this guy is probably the future face of the NBA. He's arguably the most popular player in the league, not named LeBron or Curry. He's got his own signature shoe now. He had a couple of remarkable performances in the postseason before he got hurt last year. And now he's persona non grata in the NBA. He's being looked at right now as a cautionary tale. His life could go one of 2 ways now, Sap. And I'm hoping that people step in, and this maybe is the first sign of it, and say, what are you doing? Because if you know anything about John Morant's background, and I'm sure you'll talk about this too, Sap, he does not come from the hood. He's not come from a gangbanging situation. He's upper middle class. Both his parents there.
Strong dad who travels with him, right? Who's with him on the road. So you would think, okay, this is a great story. All of a sudden, John Morant wants to be someone that he's not, which, again, some people are forced to go into that lifestyle to earn money, earn a living. Tony Montana, Scarface. Well, John Morant, again, came from a really good background. And, oh, by the way, he's making $40 million a year. He will be next year on his contract, let alone the sneaker contract and the Gatorade contract. I mean, he can make as much money as he wants. Like you said, incredibly popular player. And it's kind of sad
with
what's
young
happened.
fans, Sap. That's the dangerous thing,
They love
too.
him. Yeah, they love him because,
like, I have a couple of young cousins. He's their favorite. All of them love John Morant.
Same thing. Yeah, because he's, again, LeBron's the old guy now, so you probably have to be like 60, like I am, to like LeBron, because he plays a different style game. And Curry, it's almost to the point now where I wouldn't say we're getting tired of Curry, but he's been around for over a decade. And he's Mr. Goody Two-Shoes. We get it. But Morant plays with an edge. Now, the player that Morant's been compared to on the court the most is probably Allen Iverson, maybe a little bigger version, not quite the scorer Iverson was, because Iverson was scoring 30 a game in an NBA where 30 points per game was like, monumental. Yep. But similar in style, not a great shooter. Iverson was a better shooter, but played fearlessly, just did not fear anyone, would drive into the lane, get slammed to the court, bounce up, just really, really tough, competitive, all of that. He doesn't have to take that style on the court and take it off the court like Allen Iverson did, who had his issues as well. But Iverson came from a totally different background, right? Like he may not have known any better. And one thing I'll give Allen Iverson a lot of credit for, I remember when he won his MVP and he showed up in a sweatsuit to accept it and everybody criticized him. He wore that because his friends bought him that, and he wanted to show loyalty to his friends. He was
Allen Iverson's why they made the dress code. David Stern had the dress code.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. He and I think it was Derek Coleman was like, just let me know how much you need for a check and I'll sign it. Because, these guys were making so much money, whatever the fine was fine. I'm wearing sweats. But Iverson was incredibly loyal to his teammates and his friends to the point that it was a fault. And maybe that's happening with John Morant. I don't know.
But the thing is, those were Iverson's friends from childhood. These are John Morant's new friends.
Right. He's seeking out like criminals.
Yes.
He's brandishing a gun. I mean, yeah, we heard that story about there was a pickup game at his house and he got a gun and stuck it in the near the head of the young 17-year-old. Here's a 17-year-old kid playing with John Morant, probably having the greatest day of his life. He's playing pickup basketball with John Morant, who may have been his idol. And next thing you know, it turns sour and John Morant's got a gun. I mean, it's just kind of scary, all that stuff. When anybody starts bringing guns into discussion or into their daily life, it's just a turnoff because nothing good comes out of that. So let's hope that he's able to just take some time off. Like, I don't know who can lead him in the right direction. The problem is, I'm sure his dad is going to try to lead him in the right direction, but let's not forget now that John Morant's the breadwinner, right? $40 million a year as a player.
His dad is, I'm not sure that his dad is, I'm sure his dad's a wonderful guy, but I think he's a bit of a hothead himself. You saw the whole incident with Shannon Sharp.
Right. Exactly. That's not a good case to have either. Yeah. So he may be adding fuel to the fire, which is not a good thing. Can it be a veteran player on Memphis? And who is that guy? Like the one player that I
Steven Adams.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that would be comical. Steven Adams. First of all, what's he from New Zealand? So that accent might be a little bit tough to deal with. I mean, he's a monstrous guy. I mean, if he puts John in the corner and looks at him sternly, that might shake him up a little bit.
I believe most people think he's the toughest guy in the league, Steve.
Probably the strongest guy in the league. Yeah. When he stepped over, I think even Shannon Sharp said that when that was going on with Memphis. He says, when Steven Adams come over, he goes, that dude's a big guy. I may not want to deal with that. It's one thing to go after Desmond.
Yeah, and his dad, I think, was a professional rugby player. So I wouldn't mess with Steven Adams.
Almost like the Zdeno Chara basketball. Where you not messing with that dude. So I don't know if that's it. Like, I always throw this guy out there because I think he's a wonderful leader. I think he'll be a coach and executive when he decides to retire, like Andre Iguodala, who, was paid a lot of money by Golden State essentially to be a babysitter at times, right? When you had Durant and Draymond going at it, and he was the adult.
Remember, Sep, he was on Memphis, never played for them, and then they sent him away. So I don't think he has a good relationship with John Morant.
I don't know who has a good relationship with John Morant. And in a sense, and again, try to make lemonade out of sour lemons or chicken salad out of chicken bleep. But the thing that makes Morant appealing is he plays with that edge. Like, I love Jason Tatum.
It's an edge and a joy, right? Like, doesn't he seem to love playing basketball?
He does. And Jason Tatum enjoys playing basketball, but he doesn't play with an edge. Like, Jason Tatum never has cross words with any other player
just
on the opposition. Just the refs. That's it. And occasionally, he'll kind of get on Grant Williams, who I think have that kind of fun relationship where they kind of, punk on each other.
Brothers,
brothers. And look, Grant Williams is like the kid brother everybody just dumps on.
Yeah.
But John Morant doesn't appear to get along with like the opposition. Like he's which is kind of refreshing in today's NBA, right, where everybody's friends. So in that sense, it's good, but he's carrying that over outside the court, and he's going to have to button it up. And that's not easy to do, though, because that's how, look, we've talked about it. Like, this quarterback is so arrogant. Well, you know what? To be a great quarterback, you have to be arrogant. You've run into doctors, great surgeons, right? They don't have the best bedside manners. They're extremely confident, arrogant. Well, you kind of want that in a surgeon, or a pilot or whatever, someone who does a job that, people's lives are in their hands. So, he's going to have to try to find that thin line that where you still can be edgy on the court, be ultra competitive, but off the court, you can't be doing these things because he can have a great career and be an all-time great player. He's that talented. He works his butt off. He tries his best. I think he's good with his teammates. He's got to stop with this extracurricular activity outside the court.
Yeah, because it's not just that, it's a bad look for the league because the league has
Mhm.
shed that gang banging, thing
Right.
that they had in the late 90s, with the
Gilbert
Jailblazers and
Arenas,
stuff
right?
like that,
Yeah,
Gilbert
Gilbert Arenas.
Arenas. They've gotten rid of that. And so that's been good for marketing. They want a family friendly product. Why wouldn't you? That's how all leagues want to appeal to everybody. So that it's a bad look for the league. It's also a bad look for John Morant. Like I said, it's so popular amongst young people that he's setting a terrible example. And third, which is the most important thing to me too, is like when you're flashing around a gun and you're following people after games and stuff like that, you're putting your and other people's lives at risk.
Mhm.
And what a tragedy it would be for something so stupid as John Morant carrying a gun in a club to be misunderstood, or maybe that's his point, and he gets shot and killed because of that. That would be
Right.
just an unfathomable tragedy. But that's the sort of stuff that happens when you play around with weapons and you're, saying, this is who I am now. I'm a gangbanger, and you're, showing you're so proud of your gun that you're bringing it to a club. Like, it's asking for something horrible to happen when there's absolutely no reason for it to happen. The NBA has security. His life is not in danger. He does not need to be doing this.
No, not at all. And again, unfortunately, there's always someone out there who's tougher, who has a bigger gun, right? So it may not end well for either one of them. So it's just a disturbing story because this is one of the bright young stars in this league, and maybe it's a player on another team who gets him and sets him aside and says, "Ja, you're incredible, incredible player, all of this, but you've got to be better off the court because it's not going to end well when you get in these
Yeah,
situations."
let's see Kyrie put his money where his mouth is. Maybe he can mentor him to, be a
Oh,
peaceful person.
is he the guy for that? Oh, I don't know. I'm trying to think of someone better than
He thinks
Kyrie.
he is. I'm sure he thinks he
Shouldn't take.
is.
Well, the one thing about Kyrie, I mean, as crazy as he is, I think he's kind of a peaceful guy. Like I don't
Yeah.
picture
Oh,
him.
yeah. Loves
I don't.
peace.
He loves peace. Yeah, he just may not like certain religions. But I think he is someone that I don't think we'd see Kyrie with guns. He seems like more of a pacifist in that sense. But yeah, and it probably would have to be a veteran player. I mean, maybe LeBron, who to me is still the most respected guy in the league, is able to reach out and say, don't ruin this, don't blow this opportunity you have. You're
Yeah.
far too good and far too popular to mess it up.
Yeah, I think that would go a long way with any veteran players, but we'll see. Like I said, this will not be the last time we're talking about this. This is, a continuing story, especially because we don't know how long he's going to be out, and hopefully he takes really takes a step back and says, this is stupid. There's nothing for me to gain out of doing this. So we will see what happens with John Morant, but we'll be back later this week talking about more NBA stories, as like you said, Sap, about 15 plus games left to go before the playoffs. Seeding still very, very tight, besides the Denver Nuggets running away with the 1 seed in the West. And so we'll talk about all that sort of stuff. So make sure you check out our social medias at JohnSap25, at Jet Stryer. And thanks to Full Press Coverage. Check out their website too. And we will talk to you later, everybody. See ya.